What is up, YouTube? Jason here. And we have more today, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And today's video is really me talking about what is pushing Raskolnikov to commit this murder. Well, as I mentioned after reading only the first chapter, that he is very poor. He has found himself down on his luck and very much poverty-stricken. He's behind on his rent, so he owes money to his landlady. And he, at this point, it sounds like he doesn't work anymore. He once was a student, but he's not a student anymore. And he also taught lessons, but also gave that up. So he's sort of just coasting about, looking for handouts from his mother, who is poor herself, or his family's poor, she's a pensioner, and also pawning things off when he can for extra cash to hopefully, pay rent. Like I said, which he has fallen behind on. So something has to change. Something has to be done. He meets, and there are a series of events. By the time we meet Raskolnikov, the idea of murder is already on his mind, right? With the canvassing, he performs an experiment. The canvassing of Alyona Ivanova's residence. And during this, he learns the layout of her apartment, specific details about the keys and such that she carries on her person, that obviously unlock boxes or drawers that hold her cash flow and her possessions, certain pledges, right, that people bring to her to pay their debts. And there is a disgust towards this woman, a positive disgust and yearning for vengeance upon such an unscrupulous, exploitative person who not only takes advantage of the poor and people in need, but also takes advantage of her own sister and is not borderline, but very much positively abusive of her sister. So, there is a lust for vengeance. And Raskolnikov, also, upon going to the pub, he meets a man who is much more shameful, lives a more shameful existence than Raskolnikov does himself. And this may, he's an older man, he's older than Raskolnikov, so this may simply be because he's had more time to dig a much deeper hole for himself. He also has more responsibilities in terms of he's married, he has a daughter, he's married a younger woman who has 3 children of her own. Also, in late 19th century Russia, you could imagine that gender roles were much more stereotypical. The man probably was looked at as the provider of the family. He was meant to work and provide a living for the family, but Marmeladov doesn't. He instead gets drunk so he can suffer, and so his wife can beat him. And his daughter, Sonia, goes into prostitution to try to help pay for the family and pay for her father, make up for her father's mistakes. So this is all a great weighing on him. So he drinks to tap in to this suffering and tap into the degradation and feel its weight. But Marmeladov tells Rodion some interesting things during their encounter. He tells him that, to to be a beggar in society is positively one of the worst things you can be. They will sweep you out with a broom. People will look on you as, not only hopeless, but just, deplorable. And so he also tells him a man needs somewhere to go. But he himself, Marmeladov, has nowhere to go, so he comes to the pub and he hopes that people will listen to his story. That's really his home. It reminds me of that one Hemingway story. I forget the name of it, but the guy, you have the two waiters. It's something about, I forget. I'm not even going to try to sit here and remember the name of the story. The light's always on or whatever. It's the Hemingway short story where there's the two waiters, the younger and older waiter, and there's a man drinking. And that's really his place because he has nowhere else to go. So he drinks and he speaks incoherently. And this is very much like Marmeladov. Maybe Marmeladov is more, he's described as grandiloquent. He speaks in this exaggerated, overly articulated fashion. When maybe in reality he's not that eloquent, but he speaks as though he is. So he's putting on this pseudo intellectual air, and maybe I'm sure he does have a certain amount of wisdom, or so it seems. But just the way in which he speaks, just the big words and exaggerated expressions he uses. So, but yeah, those are something. And then obviously Raskolnikov sees their living quarters and sees his wife, I believe Katerina, pacing about, looking emaciated, clutching onto her chest, coughing. She has consumption. There's tobacco smoke filtering in from an open door behind them, behind the apartment, which I get, and people are playing a card game. And this, the tobacco smoke is obviously further agitating her emaciated, sickly state, her tuberculosis. It's further agitating her disease. And the kids are famished, they're thin, and they're one boy sleeping not even on the sofa, but on the floor with his head resting on the side of the sofa as a headrest. Girl is the youngest, or the oldest girl is in the corner comforting her sibling, the little boy who's crying. And the wife is, Katerina is, she beats them, and she also beats her husband. Marmeladov drops to his knees, and I thought he was dropping to his knees to beg for forgiveness. No, he drops to his knees to facilitate the beating he knows he's about to receive for disappearing on her and leaving his post because he had recently gotten a job. So you can imagine Raskolnikov is seeing all this shameful suffering, and he's seeing how the rich take advantage and prey upon these types of people, and prey upon their unfortunate set of circumstances. And of course the rich get richer while the poor catch pneumonia or catch tuberculosis and die off. So, and then of course Raskolnikov, he receives the letter from his mother, right? And the letter from his mother indicates that Dunya, his sister, has met this man, Pyotr Luzin, or something along those lines. And this man, he has two occupations. I think one is an attorney, and he's very well off. And his idea for marriage is to meet a poor woman, a very poor woman, so he may pull her out of poverty, and she may look upon him as her savior and benefactor. He doesn't need a dowry or anything like that, but merely he needs absolute dependence and absolute sacrifice, I guess. And to facilitate this, this is the type of woman he seeks out, and Dunya fits that mold. She's also very much agreeable. He's sort of like crude and outspoken and a man's man, I guess, harsh to be around a little bit, tells it like at least it is, or tells it how he sees it. And I don't think he's going to be one to be persuaded too easily. And so their idea, the mother, Rodion's mother and his sister, Dunya's idea for him, well, also it should be said that Dunya is doing this. She's agreeing to marry him. She stayed up all night thinking. She prayed. She got down and prayed. She wasn't sure what to do, whether to marry this man or not. Ultimately, she decides that this will be her sacrifice, not only to better her situation. She could care less about herself, it seems. So it seems. She's very much altruistic. She does this for the sake of her brother. She loves her family, and she believes that, her brother, because the man intends on moving to Petersburg, St. Petersburg, where Raskolnikov is located, where he lives. And they think in time this man will give not only Raskolnikov a job, but hopefully go into partnership with him once Raskolnikov managed to graduate and finish up his studies and become, a credible attorney. So essentially, Raskolnikov must take a handout from this man, and this, this makes it so that Raskolnikov is not the savior, not the provider for the betterment of the family, but it is this man, and Raskolnikov, he sort of takes Rodion's place. And fulfills Rodion's responsibilities as a man to look out for his family. So this encroaches upon many things in Rodion's direction: his perception of his responsibilities, his masculinity, and it alludes to his failure as a man. So it outlines his failure. So now, obviously it would be expected of Raskolnikov to follow in these prearranged, preordained footsteps. And if only he can do so, then he can pull himself out of depravity and have a decent life. But it's all at the kind hand of her sister's benefactor, which, like I said, will become his benefactor in time. And that was sort of the final straw, at least so it felt, that, is pushing Rodion to commit murder. You also have the chance, the eavesdropping of Lizaveta at the marketplace, where it sounds like she is going to be out of the apartment past 6 p.m., so he can focus his attention on solely murdering Alyona Ivanova, and not her, kind-hearted, gentle sister, simple-minded, simple-hearted sister. And he would like to avoid this if he can. He's not, he certainly wants revenge, but he wants a certain type of revenge. He wants revenge against people who fit a certain archetype: unscrupulous, wealthy, casting a judging eye, who cast judgment on the poor, who sit at the top of the hierarchy, like the eternal footman in T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and sort of snicker at him. So there's that. There's also Rodion's, the very first time he pawned something to Alyona, he went to the pub afterward, and he had a chance encounter, totally coincidental, but to Rodion, it was more than coincidence. It's almost like a sign that this is the act he must commit, right? That this is his calling, is to commit this murder, which is utterly insane. And he comes up with this certain rationale behind it. Although it feels as though Rodion, as I've said, even in the first chapter, it feels as though he is simply in a trance and he is totally controlled by these unconscious desires that are bubbling up to the surface, and they are the puppet masters swinging the axe at the end of the day, and not Rodion himself. But this can be seen in the ways in which he lies, like the words, the lie sort of sews itself together that allows him to gain entry into her apartment. Oh, it's Raskolnikov, you know me, why are you acting like you don't know me, Alyona Ivanovich? I have your pledge, I'm here to pay you back. A silver cigarette box tied up. He also has the axe tied in a noose. A noose was sewn into his overcoat. And so these clever, his displays of cleverness and forethought, they come at a point where the moment is sort of driven to its crisis and he must act, right? He feels as though he must act, and that's at which point in which cleverness sort of sews these lies together. So, yeah, like I said in the last video, so the Machiavellian murderous bolder, once static boulder has gained traction, and once it has begun to tumble, there is no turning back. So Raskolnikov overhears Lizaveta will be absent from the apartment. He has the meeting with the student who articulates Rodion's desires to murder Alyona. So there's a sense of camaraderie and a feeling as though he is not alone in these murderous fantasies that he's having. And therefore he may be looked upon with some sympathy, and there may be also like a sense of triumph, and he may be turned into some type of anti-hero should the evidence come out and he be convicted anyway. But the thing is, Raskolnikov doesn't foresee the guilt that is going to plague him and bog him down following the murder. And it is the guilt that manifests in physical illness, a fever, and a fainting episode at the police station. He's been summoned to pay back a debt to his landlady. An IOU he must sign to agree to pay at a later date. He faints at the police station, and it is only after his fainting do they hit him with a series of questions. How long have you been sick? Only a day or two. Well, were you out last night? Yes, I was out. You were out while you were sick? Yes, I was. About what time was this? 7 p.m. Oh, okay. Well, we won't detain you, but this, of course, arouses suspicion. That was the last chapter I wrote. I believe part 2, chapter 1, or read, sorry, rather. That was the last part that I read. Okay, so then you have this chance meeting that sort of builds a sense of camaraderie, in which Rodion's desires are articulated by somebody else that is not him. And further, warrants his actions, because not only is he suffering at the hands of this scrupulous, exploitative pawnbroker, but others are suffering and in debt to her as well. And she takes satisfaction at watching these people squirm. So this, of course, it's a good thing to eradicate such people from this planet, right? At least I'm saying according to Raskolnikov's viewpoint. And then, of course, the last bit, I think, is the dream. The dream Raskolnikov has. Well, not only the dream, while he's walking to his friend's house, he spots a woman who appears drunk. She goes and sits down on a bench. There's a man, and she appears dressed. Someone dressed her. Her dress is all tattered. It appears as though maybe she's been, I'm not sure, assaulted or taken advantage of. Sexually exploited, I don't know exactly. Someone got her drunk on purpose to do so, maybe. And then there's this fat, this overweight, stout man or something across the street who is gazing at her. And upon seeing Raskolnikov next to her, he looks, upon him with, just... He's pissed at Raskolnikov for coming in the way of this, a certain insolence. There's a certain insolence in the man's demeanor, right? And so, yeah, and eventually, so this is just another example of people acting on egregious, violent, abusive desires, right? And then you have the dream that Raskolnikov has of the men beating the sickly-looking horse, the old horse or whatever. This man has all these people pile upon the cart, and he lashes the horse to try to pull them. The horse struggles with all its might, but of course can't pull them. And then they go about beating the horse to death. And the people take great pleasure in beating this horse to death and lashing it and seeing it suffer. And humans are just a murderous, cannibalistic type, too intelligent, but also a combination of intelligence and selfish, self-centered, and also violence. It's just a cauldron of all these poor qualities that has produced such a disease that is Homo sapiens upon the planet, that obviously wreak havoc and make it hell for everybody else who falls below them in the food chain. As well as not only other species, other animals, mammals, but also for other humans. They make one another suffer. They take out their aggression and anger on others, but also on themselves. We're a very hypocritical, convoluted, evil type of being, or at least perhaps in Raskolnikov's mind. And so all this pushes Raskolnikov towards murder. And then on the day of the act, things line up perfectly for him. And it's honestly a bit hard to read, in a sense, because Raskolnikov would have gotten away with it. There would be no suspicion, even upon getting summons. Now, I can understand getting summonsed and being totally beside yourself after committing a double homicide. Okay? And obviously, Raskolnikov had to hide to get away, because after he killed both Alyona and her sister, Elizaveta, Kosh came knocking on the door. on some business, and then another guy, a younger student, came knocking on the door. And they're like, why is she not answering? And instead of turning and going away, the young student went to get the porter to come and, check things out, because they didn't understand. Well, they saw that the door was unfastened. But the thing is, and Raskolnikov thinks that this is his mind, like his rationale, his faculties failing him at such a critical moment in time. How did he forget to lock the door? The thing is, if he would have locked the door and he wouldn't have forgot, Lizaveta wouldn't have been able to get in. She wouldn't have been able to get in, and yeah, she would have survived, but she could have begun pounding. She may have went down and got the porter much earlier on, and this may have led to Raskolnikov's capture. Possibly not. He might have been able to sneak out like he did beforehand. But the thing is, much more time passed, so that apartment that had just been freshly painted, in which the painters had just left from, that allowed Raskolnikov a hiding place while the men passed up him on the stairs to go back up to Alyonya's apartment, that may have been occupied by those painters, and they would have seen him. There would have been nowhere to hide. He would have had to pass, at that point, Lizaveta and the porter on the staircase. So things like, and also the procuring of the axe from the porter of his own apartment, like his own apartment building, and how he was able to get the axe and then return it without it being even noticed that it was gone. So things lined up beautifully for Raskolnikov, besides being summoned to the police station. The thing is, if Raskolnikov would, and then he makes a big he begins arguing with the assistant superintendent. Like, just take the summons, sign it, and get the hell out of there. He does a horrible job at remaining inconspicuous. He argues with the people. He shows up looking tattered and in rags. He's sickly looking. He may not be able to help the latter two, but he certainly didn't have to argue with the assistant superintendent. And he could have signed his decree or signed his notice or whatever, his agreement to pay, and he could have got out of there if he wouldn't have taken some deep breaths, and he thought to get up and to confess. So of course his heart's pounding. I mean, I can sympathize with that. Like, your heart would be pounding, regardless of why you were there. The guilt, and if you're not an utter psychopath, any sane person, which Raskolnikov is not a psychopath, like, there may be some other pathology that is working against him. I don't know if he's a narcissist or something, or I don't know. I can't begin to, I'm not a mental health professional. I can't begin to diagnose Raskolnikov. We can guess, but yeah, if he would have just signed this, so your heart would be pounding, but if he would have just stayed inconspicuous, and, he thinks he wants to get up and confess and tell all to the superintendent, but he gets up to leave and he faints. And this leads them to question him. And guess what? He doesn't have an alibi. And not only does he not have an alibi, so it sounds, he was out of his apartment during the time of the murder. And if they can somehow inquire further, someone in the apartment building, if they've seen him, in Alyonya's apartment building before, if they can place him as someone who used her as a pawnbroker before, then this just further arouses suspicion. So I'm going to continue reading. We're going to see whether or not guilt eats Raskolnikov alive, or he can further rationalize away his misfortune and his grievous act, or is guilt going to eat him alive and he's going to be convicted in the end? I'm not sure yet, and I haven't been spoiled, so I haven't read any spoilers. I'm going to try to keep it that way. Like I said, I'm on part 2, chapter 2. That's where I'll be beginning. Page, you can't really see, but page 109 is where I'll be picking up next. And yeah, be on the lookout for more videos about crime and punishment and whatever else I read. So yeah, thank you guys. See ya.